I'm Judge Penny Wolfgang, and welcome to The Big Picture. While the Bills may have lost against the Bengals in the big divisional playoff game, have fans lost hope that a prize Super Bowl victory will ever be in our future? It's telethon season, with the big television fundraiser coming up in less than 6 weeks. We'll hear from the mother of this year's celebrity child, and this week marks the 1-month milestone for the blizzard of 2022. How were some hometown heroes recognized for their life-saving efforts? Find out right here, right now, on The Big Picture. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the program. I know it's tough to relive what happened at Highmark Stadium this past Sunday, as we all wanted our hometown Buffalo Bills to win the divisional title and move forward to the Super Bowl. But it wasn't to be. Joining us for some analysis is sports social media podcaster and host Brad Gelber from the West Her Automotive Group. Welcome, Brad. Thanks for joining us again on the show. It's always great to talk to you, but not so much this time.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me.
We talked earlier in the year, and it seemed a little brighter future at that point. But before we get into the game, the big news this past week or so has been when the governor and everybody announced that, not just the governor, but everybody locally, that the director of the Erie County Stadium Corporation, get that right,
Yeah.
unanimously approved the Buffalo Bills' new stadium deal. So the governor says we're getting closer to completion. And of course, everybody is really curious and wants to know, how will a new facility move the team forward? What effect will it have, considering how much it snowed last Sunday, for example? I don't know how many people have said to me, "Oh, don't we need a dome? Look at the snow." And all the people watching, seeing all the snow from other areas, like my family in New York, and going, "Oh my God, it's terrible up there."
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it certainly is, I think, a point of discussion, as you said. The thing is, I don't think, based on what they've said for plans, that they're actually planning to move forward with any sort of dome or covering. It looks like the shape of the stadium will have covered seats, but the field itself will still be open, which, depending, some people feel like that's Buffalo football, though. They want to be outside in the elements. But it's just funny, sometimes you think about like the weather advantage. You hear snow advantage in Buffalo. Like, the guys that play for the team didn't grow up here. A lot of them are from the South. They're from the West Coast. I mean, Josh Allen's from California, played in Wyoming, but I always find it funny. It's just like, they're still human beings. They still have to be cold and play in this, so they don't have some advantage just because they play in Buffalo. But yeah, I think the fans themselves, though, definitely are looking forward to maybe the new stadium, in the sense that it'll have some more coverage, but it'll still be an open air facility overall.
I read that there would be a little more coverage, more seats that are covered, but still open. And we talk about the weather, and we'll talk about the game a little bit, but obviously, you said already, and I think most people feel it wasn't the weather. Right. Or as somebody said to me, maybe the Bengals had better shoes.
Yeah.
I think that was a joke. But anyway, so it's tough. It's tough for the fans. It's tough for all of us. And I don't know, what's your take, and what do we have to look forward to? Yeah. And what did you hear as an insider? What do you know that I don't know?
Yeah. I mean, I think, honestly, just hearing the players talk about the game afterwards, yesterday or earlier in the week, there was locker room clean out. So it was when the players talked to the media. And I think it's just this sense of, disappointment. Obviously, they set out to win the Super Bowl. They weren't able to do that. 3 years in a row now, they've made it a little bit further in the playoffs and haven't gotten to that goal. So I think at this point, really, the sense among the team is just, what do we need to do to take that next step? And it was interesting hearing from players like Josh Allen, Isaiah McKenzie, Dawson Knox. They're all saying the same things we're saying. We're asking the same questions. We don't have the answers, which I think is frustrating for fans to maybe hear, but they're essentially saying each year we feel like we're doing the right things. We're playing well in the regular season. We get to the playoffs, and it's just not happening for the team. So I think that becomes, it's on Brandon Beane, the general manager of the Bills. It's on Sean McDermott, the head coach, to figure out, okay, how do we take a team that's done really well in the regular season and make that one more step further to get them to the Super Bowl and then hopefully win it next year.
Now, I guess from posts that you've put on social media, you have some ideas and personal thoughts about how it impacted you as a sports enthusiast and as a podcaster.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all human beings, so I think the fact that, you do get tied up in this community and the team. I think last time I was here, we talked a lot about, what sense the Bills play in the Western New York community. It isn't maybe like some other cities like a Los Angeles or a New York City where, they enjoy football, but it's not in their DNA, I'll call it. And in here, it feels like, the minute the season ends, there's a little bit of a letdown because it's just so much about what people's lives, even if you're not a diehard fan, it becomes, all right, well, I'm going to go to the games. There's a swelling of excitement in the community. And now that all just kind of stops until summertime when it picks up again. So I feel like, for myself, other fans, perhaps media and all those, it's kind of just this letdown because it builds up for so long and then it just stops when they lose. It just comes to an abrupt stop. So I think that's a hard thing for everyone to kind of deal with.
Do you think that the hype and the build-up and everything, the expectations, is like my daughter once sent us a card that said, do you know how you can be proud of us, to my husband and I, you know how you can be proud of us every day, lower your expectations?
Yeah.
So I wonder if that has to do with the Bills and the team as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, but I think they've worked so hard to build up the expectations for so many years. I used to do a show here years ago, and they'd have me on to talk about what do the Bills need to do to make the playoffs, and I'd have a list of about 8 things that had to happen just for them to make the playoffs, and they've changed that culture. It's become an expectation that they make the playoffs, but like you said, with more expectations becomes a bigger letdown when things don't go right. But I think it's not a bad thing that's the sense, and I think the players have admitted we have high expectations for ourselves, but at the same time, they have to find a way to go from just the expectations to actually capitalizing on them.
To actually coming through,
Yes.
to actually performing.
Right.
And that's not only locally the expectations, by the way, it's the whole country.
Right.
The hype about this is the Bills year,
Yes.
and Josh Allen's the one to look out for, and blah, 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 blah. Was the fact that several key players were not available on the field, was that important?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you're missing a player like Von Miller, for instance, or Micah Hyde, or some of these guys who are paid a lot of money to impact the game or the team in the playoffs especially, it's going to impact you. But I think every team goes through injuries. They have to overcome adversity, which this team probably had to overcome way more adversity than the average team. But I don't think you can use those as excuses because every team faces it in some manner. But I think you would be naive to not at least insinuate that did have some impact on the outcome of the game.
And speaking of the players, and you said you were there for the clean out, or, the people who were listening to what they said, what about Stephon Diggs' comments?
Yeah, that was a little surprising that, there was reports that he left, after the game before the media got to speak to the players, and then he wasn't around for locker room cleanout, but Sean McDermott did say he was there when the team spoke, which was the most important part, obviously, and I think if you watched the game, maybe you saw him pretty animated on the sidelines, perhaps in Josh Allen's direction, which we're not used to seeing because they're so close and such good friends. But the team's point was that's what we like about Stephon Diggs. We enjoy his passion for the game, and he's an emotional person just like a lot of these guys are, and perhaps he didn't carry it out in the best way possible, but at the same time, it's kind of what gives him that advantage as a competitor. So I wouldn't make maybe as big of a deal as some have out of this. I think him and Josh will be perfectly fine going forward, but I think he's disappointed because he feels like he does the best to help this team when the ball's in his hands, and it wasn't in his hands on Sunday. So I can see kind of where that upset nature came from.
Right. So tell Bean and tell McDermott and tell our viewers what should they do during the off season.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing they really need to do is address the offensive line because if you just watch football as a casual fan even, I think we all saw Josh Allen's elbows were bleeding through the shirt. I mean, the guy's just, he already had an elbow injury this year. I think you need to protect your number one asset, which is Josh Allen. So they need to find a way to address the offensive line. And then they need to work on the defense a little bit. I think we hear a lot about how good this defense is, statistically speaking, or if you watch the games, you hear the analysts talking about this is, a number one defense. And then we see Sunday, Cincinnati just moves the ball at will up and down. So I think they really need to address the defense too, and the defensive line. Obviously getting Von Miller back would be a big part of that, but offensive line and then I think defense, especially pressure on the quarterback, are two things. And then perhaps another playmaker for Josh Allen, just alongside Stephon Diggs and Dawson Knox, some of those guys, just to help them on offense as well. So there's no shortage of things they can do, I think, to improve next year, but hopefully they'll be able to do that.
So is management going to listen to you, number one, and are they going to build the team around Josh Allen? Which I think the answer is yes, but I'll ask the question anyway.
I don't know if they'll listen to me. If I'm welcome to give them a few more pointers if they'd like. But yeah, I mean, the fact is Josh Allen's new contract for $258 million kicks in next year. So they're definitely going to build around him. I mean, they're tied into him for the foreseeable future at this point. And, maybe people don't always understand the salary cap or the implications of that, but it does have a big impact when that new contract kicks in terms of how much they can build around him. But yes, they certainly will be trying to.
You already mentioned this, but it bears repeating that it's been a tough year for the team because it's been a tough year for Buffalo.
Right.
So I think one thing leads to another, and it had an effect, definitely. Yeah,
and the players spoke about that too. I think there was a certain level of mental exhaustion, physical exhaustion, just having gone through a lot of the things with, the whole Damar Hamlin incident, and just one thing after another, moving the game with the snowstorm, playing on short weeks, traveling more than normal. I think they just got to a point perhaps where they said they didn't have the juice on Sunday, and I think it was just a physical and mental exhaustion by the end of the season.
Now, I'm sure that millions of people are listening to us today and hearing your tips and advice, but if they want to get further, talk to you further, what should they do? Where are you on social media, and where's your podcast?
Yeah, the easiest way to reach me on social media is at Twitter. It's just at Bradley Gelber, but you can find our podcast on all major streaming platforms, YouTube, all the major social networks. So not hard to find, I should say. It's just the Team Western podcast, but that's how you'd reach me.
After they've watched the show.
Of course. After they watch WBBZ.
After they watched The Big Picture.
Yes.
Brad Gelber, thank you so much for joining us with your take on the Bills. When we come back, honoring hometown heroes.